Hello everyone, welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I am Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Hey, you know, we talk all the time here about all the situations that can get us into self-defense situations. We talk all the time about the law leading up to getting into self-defense situations, but we don't spend enough time talking about what do we do immediately after a self-defense situation. So I thought today would be a good opportunity so we can spend a few minutes and talk about what should I do immediately following a self-defense shooting. Okay, before we get rolling, you all know the drill now. If you like this video, go ahead and click that like button. If you want to stay up to date on issues related to your Second Amendment rights, click that subscribe button. Click the little bell logo if you want to be notified when we post new videos. And let's keep the comments and discussions coming. Yada, yada, yada. You know the drill. Okay, now listen. First of all, a couple disclaimers here, okay? First thing, I am not advocating that we have to go out and shoot anybody. I am certainly not advocating that we do go out and shoot anybody. And part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we do talk about all the time here at Washington Gun Law, is to recognize when we are in situations that perhaps we should not be in, situations that are volatile, situations that could potentially become dangerous, and to get ourselves the hell out of there. But I do realize, especially in this crazy time that we live in now, especially in some parts of this state, that sometimes things are simply out of our control and we do end up in a lawful self-defense situation. Now, we talk all the time about when can we use force, how much force can we use, what leads up to our ability to use force, and things like that. What we don't spend enough time talking about is, oh God, what do I do now? I just had to use some force. And that's what we're going to be spending some time on today. Now, this is a topic that I hope that none of my viewers here ever have to utilize. I hope that this becomes really neat, trivial information, and that's it, because I pray to all of you that none of you ever need to use any of this advice. The other disclaimer I want to give about this is that I am not giving legal advice to everyone out there that this is what you do every single time if you've been involved in a lawful self-defense shooting situation. Every case is unique. Every case turns on a tiny little fact here or there. And so it is on a case-by-case basis. But this is some generalizations. This is through my years of experience doing this and talking to other attorneys, defense attorneys, talking to other self-defense experts, talking to members of law enforcement, talking to prosecuting attorneys. And after a while, you begin to see some certain themes continuously pop up. And that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today. Okay. First of all, quick rundown on the rules so we know what the baseline law is. Remember, under RCW 9A.16.020 subsection 3, we can use any force reasonable, necessary, and proportional to defend ourselves or other people in our presence. Now, we cannot use lethal force, however, until we get up to RCW 9A.16.050, or more importantly, that we or somebody else in our presence is in imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury. Absent that, or a felony being committed upon our person, or a felony being committed inside of our home, absent that, we probably are not in a situation where we can be using lethal force. So for the sake of all of this hypothetical, we are going to assume that you have used lethal force and have done so lawfully. All right, let's start with the what do we do immediately after the shots are fired. The first thing we need to do is assess the situation. Has the assailant truly been stopped? Then they are no longer a threat. That's the first thing we need to assess. Second thing we need to assess is, have you been injured in any way? And so you need to do a quick once-over on you. There's some really good videos by tactical folks out here in the YouTubeverse that will teach you how to really properly do that correctly. I'm not going to get into that. That's their subject matter. And then the third thing we need to assess is, can you remain at the scene? Because, yeah, as a defense attorney, I would like you to be able to remain at the scene. It's better from an evidentiary standpoint. But sometimes the scene has become so volatile due to the exchange of gunfire, things like that, that that's no longer possible. If you stay at the scene, there may be more violence that's necessary at that point. But if you can remain at the scene, I want you to remain at the scene. If you have to extract yourself and go to another location, go to that location. And be able to articulate why you had to go to that location. Now, the weapon. Let's talk about the weapon. What should we do with the weapon? Again, if possible, the weapon should immediately go back in the holster in the exact condition it was at the time you discharged your last round. Why do we want it in that situation? Well, the holster is going to be the safest place for it to be, And we want it in the exact conditions so that whenever your version of events is shared with law enforcement, if ever, the ballistics is going to match up. The number of shell casings is going to match up with your story. The inspection of the firearm is going to match up to your story, which is going to match up with the ballistics. And that's exactly what we want. Okay, the third thing we need to do is, yes, we need to call 911, and we need to call them as soon as we are done with number 1 and 2. Number 1 and 2 should be done within a matter of a few seconds, because immediately we need to get on the phone, we need to call 911. Now, this is really important, and we're going to slow it down for a second, because the next couple of minutes get really, really critical. We are calling 911 for one main reason. And the main reason is that you have been the victim of a crime, and you need to report that. If we have fired shots lawfully, if we have lawfully fired upon another person, if we have lawfully shot another person, we most certainly have been the victim of a crime. In fact, we were the victim of a very serious crime to give us the lawful justification to pull that trigger. That needs to be reported to 911, and that needs to be the matter of first impression. Now, there is secondary information that is almost as equally important, and that is that there is a person who is injured and probably requires medical attention. And if a person is injured and requires medical attention, it is your responsibility on the 911 call to immediately request medical attention and to ensure that it is coming. Now, this is where things get real tricky. 911 operators, God bless them because they got a really difficult job, but one of the things that they're trained to do is to keep you on the phone to gather as much information as humanly possible. Now, they are not working for the prosecution. They're not. What they're actually working for is law enforcement. The more information they can gather, the more information they can get to law enforcement so that when they get to the scene, obviously the more knowledge they have about the situation, the better it's going to be for everybody and the safer it's going to be for everybody. But these calls are all recorded, okay? And so while the 911 operators are assisting law enforcement in gathering information, what the recordings ultimately turn out to do is be very helpful in assisting the prosecution in gathering information as well. So the information that we give, even when you know that you have pulled the trigger with absolute legal justification, we have to limit the information we give in this critical time window, okay? And so this is the only type of information that we're willing to give them. Your name, your date of birth, a description of yourself so that law enforcement can find you, a location of where you are at that current time when you make the call, and the fact that you've been the victim of a crime and that somebody else needs medical attention. Beyond that, there is no other information vital to the 911 operator. Now, she will certainly want to keep you on the phone. She wants to keep talking. You are under no legal obligation to remain on a 911 call after you have provided all the necessary information. Okay, and I do recommend at that point that you do hang the call up and remain in the location that you reported to 911 so that law enforcement can easily locate you. Okay, now the smoke is cleared. 911 has been called. We can hear the sirens coming. So this is what we now have to do when law enforcement gets there. And let's back up for a second here and let's talk about the reality of what's happening here. And this is no comment on law enforcement at all, who I actually hold in very high regards, as do most of my viewers out there. But this is really a comment on the human equation. You see, what happens is when call goes in to 911 from somebody else that hears the shots fired, and most often that first caller is just a passerby, a disinterested third person whose attention is drawn to the shooting because of the sound of gunfire. What they see is the shooter shooting another person. They do not know what led up to this. They do not know what precipitated any of this. They do not know that perhaps the shooter was being victimized in a rather violent crime before they pulled their firearm and started discharging their weapon. And so what happens is they give a description of the gunman or the shooter, and the person who's now laying on the sidewalk and bleeding out is the victim. In reality, in a lawful self-defense shooting situation, the roles are actually reversed. The person who's laying on the sidewalk bleeding out, they are actually the perpetrator, and the person who's left standing with the warm gun in their hand, they're actually the victim. But this is the information that's given to law enforcement, and law enforcement is coming in full force, and they've heard that shots have been fired, and they've been told that a person is down, and you can imagine the adrenaline rush that would happen to anybody in this situation. And again, this is not unique to law enforcement, but it's unique to their work environment in many ways, okay? So they come running in, they're all worked up, they got to control the situation right away, and you have been described as the shooter. So what you do within the first few minutes of law enforcement showing up not only is going to be critical to your defense, it's going to be very critical to you staying alive. All right, what's the first thing we do when law enforcement gets there? We immediately identify ourselves. Do we do it by running on over there? No. We calmly walk over, or if we have done our job correctly and law enforcement has listened, they will find you in the exact location that you told them they would find you. They will see you because you match the exact description you gave them. When law enforcement begins to contact you, the weapon at this point should be holstered in whichever place it normally is. If by chance you do not have a holster, the best thing for you to do at that point would be have the firearm laying on the ground or perhaps back in the automobile or some other secure location nearby where you could keep guard of it, but it is not to be in your hands in any way, shape, or form. The first question law enforcement is going to ask you is where the gun is, and you better have a good answer. Now, if it's on you, for example, I carry appendix, I would have my hands in the air as law enforcement approached me, and when they asked me where the firearm was, I would literally just give them one of these, it's right down here, and just let them know it's right down here on right appendix. And I would never reach. You're not going to reach down, grab your shirt, show it to them, or anything like that, because you can imagine the volatility of this situation. Now, at this point, they're going to give you some very specific commands about where they want you to go, what they want you to do with your hands, because they're going to want to disarm you immediately. Listen to those commands. Do as they say. If you do not understand something, politely ask for clarification. Now, a reality is sometimes multiple officers show up at the same time, they come from different directions, and they start all barking different orders at you, and that can be really problematic. You need to establish a line of communication with one officer and let them know, I'm getting conflicting directions. What do you want me to do? At no point should you do anything with your hands other than leave them above your head. Now, when it comes to disarming you, I have talked to many law enforcement officers, and they all have a different way of doing it. But in many instances, you will be handcuffed first and then disarmed. Do not resist. Do not obstruct. And since I'm telling you right now, please do not be surprised when this happens. It's law enforcement's job to immediately secure the scene, and it's a much better path for them to first handcuff you and later learn that you are a person that they could uncuff, than not cuff you and later learn that, in fact, they should have restrained you. Now, the other situation that you need to be aware of is that in some instances, the custody may only be temporary until they kind of sort things out, but oftentimes, the sorting out's going to take more than an hour or two at the crime scene. And in very many instances, when I've had individuals who we knew lawfully discharged their weapon, they were still booked into jail under suspicion of crime. Now, 24, 48 hours later, as kind of everything clarified, in many instances they were released with no charges being filed. But you do need to understand, again, it's a safer path for law enforcement, right? I would rather book this person into custody, realize, no, it was a valid self-defense claim, kick him out of there, then send him home thinking it's a valid self-defense claim. Then when all the evidence comes through, we realize, no, the dude's a cold-blooded murderer. Now we got to go find him. Oh, where is he? Geez, shockingly, he's no longer at home. And finally, and this is perhaps the most important thing, when you are taken into custody, yes, they will read you Miranda rights, and they will want to talk to you. And the problem when we are involved in lawful self-defense situations is we want to convince everyone right away of the righteousness of what we've done. We want to convince everyone that I had the legal authority to do it. And while it very well may be the case, the problem is that you are in no emotional or mental condition to be selling that story at that point. But we want to sell it because we want to immediately convince everyone of the righteousness of what we've done. Law enforcement would love to talk to you. They really would. And they will continue to talk to you as long as you're willing to do it. But unfortunately, in this situation, until you've had an objective set of eyes and an objective mind with a legal background that can actually take a look at the whole situation, you don't know if talking to law enforcement is the next best move. So, What is the only statement that you are willing to say to law enforcement? And I think we should all practice this together. It is, I am not able to make any statement to you or any other member of law enforcement until I first had an opportunity to speak with my attorney. So the bottom line, folks, is this, is we spend a lot of time here at Washington Gun Law talking about the law as what we do to get in or out of a self-defense situation. We talk about how much force we can use, when we can use it. We don't talk enough about, my God, what do we do if we've had to use it? What do we do in this situation? Well, first of all, we need to immediately assess the situation, make sure you're safe, the scene is safe. We need to immediately call 911 after we've holstered the weapon in its original condition. We need to give 911 very limited information, but importantly telling them that you were the victim of the crime. We need to let them know where you're going to be located so law enforcement can find you, and we need to make sure that aid is coming for the victim if they in fact need it. What do we do when law enforcement gets there? We immediately identify ourselves. We immediately follow and listen to all commands as how they want to disarm us. If they are taking us into custody, we do not obstruct, we do not resist, we do not give any attitude. We get taken into custody. Yes, we will be Mirandized. Yes, they will be more than happy to talk to you, but you will not say anything to them other than, I cannot make any statement to you until I first had a chance to talk to a lawyer. Listen, this is advice that I hope none of you ever need to use. Listen, you may have more questions about this or anything else related to your Second Amendment rights, and if you do, don't ever hesitate to contact us at WashingtonGunLaw.com, or of course you can call us directly at 425-765-0487. Now let's remember, part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here at Washington Gun Law, is to know what the law is in every situation and how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching. Stay safe.